Hello, people. Hello, fam. It's
Hey,
been
sis,
a
hey.
it's been a while. I actually didn't look at when we last recorded our show, but we're back and better than ever.
This is our we're quarterly, so this is our summer episode. I feel like
Yes.
we need to start. It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step two,
And
step two.
we need theme music. So if anybody out there wants to donate your services to help us create like a theme song, then we would be ever so appreciative.
I know
Also,
we've been asking for a theme song support for like since the beginning of the show. Like,
I
hopefully,
know.
this will be the time someone steps up and says, "Yes, we can
I
do
know. So you all may have noticed that if you're watching this on LinkedIn, we are not recording or streaming live, which is something that we always do. If you're watching this on YouTube, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to our
But
world."
we decided that we wanted to start pre-recording these just so that when we stream it live, we can watch it with you all and like interact. Because when we stream these live on LinkedIn, we see the comments coming in, but we can't actively engage. But by pre-recording this, we're able to engage with y'all in the comments, engage with you when it's premiering live. So we're just testing out something new. So welcome to the YouTube and the LinkedIn fam. So my name is Janice Asare. I am a workplace equity consultant. I'm a writer. I am a lover of food and all things sweet. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-host Kina to share a few words about herself.
And also, if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, our show is called J.K. No, but for real,
I didn't
right?
even intro ourselves, man.
And that's because Janice is Janice. I'm Kina. Technically, I'm a J2, but that's not important.
Technically, we're JJ,
I
but
know JJ. And so my name is Joquina Reed. I am a DEI practitioner consultant, with the emphasis on justice. This is what my work is, with a particular interest on justice. So I guess I would be a Jedi, for lack of a better phrase. I live in the South, the dirty South. I am an auntie, a sister, and someone who believes that centering Blackness is how we eliminate violent systems. So I'm glad to be here with you
I love
during
that.
this episode. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and we felt like, we like to start off each of the J.K. No But For Real episodes kind of highlighting why we decided to record. And so this is this was like a really important episode. I think we've been telling each other that we wanted to record something once Biden announced that he was no longer running for president and Kamala stepped up and then became the Democratic nominee. You and I both, like in our group chats, we've been talking about all that would come with a Kamala like presidency, and even just Kamala being the front runner
Yeah.
of the party. All that has come and all that we anticipate will come with this historic and monumental sort of like announcement.
Mm.
And we felt like as Black women, as DEI practitioners, as people that are committed to the liberation of Black people globally, it was important for us to have a conversation about like what this moment means and how we as Black women can protect ourselves during this season of just like, I don't know what you want to call it. I want to call it season of chaos, but just during this specific season. Do you want to break down some of like your thoughts around why we felt like it was important to have this conversation?
Yeah. I think it's important. I'm always the person who comes through with the like disclaimers, right? Janice and I are not endorsing Vice President Harris. We're not endorsing any presidential candidates. Okay. So I want to make it really clear. While I personally think voting is very important, I recognize all the barriers to voting that exist in the United States, right? So I want to make sure that no one thinks we're doing this to be like low key, high key, mid key, endorsing any candidate. We're really talking about what this political moment means to Black folks who work, but particularly Black femmes, Black women, Black non-mask, because there will be impacts. And so we want to equip those people with the tools to navigate this. And then we also want to equip organizational leaders with the tools to navigate this as well. So I just want to put that ahead. When I think it was Sunday when President Biden was like, I'm out.
Yeah, it was a
And
Sunday.
yeah, and I tell you, Jay, like my stomach immediately went into knots. Like immediately. It wasn't a delay. It wasn't like a, oh, this is cool. Let's see what happens. It was like a sense of dread, you know? Because I was like, in a world where she's running and in a version of reality where she wins. All I immediately thought is Black women are going to have to pay the price for this. And so I believe that day I went online to see what other Black women were thinking. And it won't surprise you, there were Black people who had the same sense of dread that I had, you know, like, oh shit, like it's about to go down. And we weren't wrong. We weren't wrong. So I really want to say, I would like to encourage people to try their best to suspend their judgment during this episode, because I can see a version of this where people feel like, oh, because we're talking about Vice President Harris and her candidacy, we're celebrating or amplifying her, and that's not our intention. What we're talking about is what she represents as someone being racialized as Black that still does have Southeast Asian and Caribbean ancestry, you know, and what that means to the both larger kind of society we live in, and then what does that mean when it comes to people who have similar racialized experiences, right? So off top, I just want to name that Vice President Harris has already made history as the first Vice President of the United States of Black and Southeast Asian descent, and now has gone on to make more history as the first person who is Black of Southeast Asian descent to get the Democratic support of a major party, right? Not the first Black woman to run for president. So I just want to be clear. Check your history books. All right. And you don't get to this moment without a Shirley Chisholm or a Barbara Jordan, right? You don't get to these moments without a Callie House. So there's a legacy there that she's stepping into. But I also think we don't get to this moment without acknowledging three specific things that are important. That Vice President Harris, as well as people who are racialized like her, right, other Black women, have experienced at least 3 levels of racialized oppression. And I think that's really important, because I want people to understand that there's all types of oppression. There's gendered oppression, racialized oppression, religious oppression, right? Like, there's enough oppression to go around, right? So when I say 3 levels of racialized oppression, I'm naming the fact that she experiences anti-Blackness, which refers to the consistent and long-standing history of dehumanizing people of African descent. So that means that I, as a descendant of enslaved people, my humanity is questioned. That means you, as the descendant of immigrants, your humanity is questioned. That is true of all people across the African diaspora, no matter what version of Black you are. And that's another conversation we can have, right?
So it's important, you know, because I know there may be some people watching this saying, but Kina, she's not Black, right? But Kamala ain't Black. How can she experience anti-Blackness? And we have to understand that, like, race is a social construct. Kamala is read as Black.
Yeah.
Even regardless of whether her father, I actually haven't verified the validity of this, but folks say her dad was Indo-Caribbean or Indo-Jamaican. He wasn't fully Black. From the photos, he looks Black to me, but that's neither here nor there. You know, folks saying that she's not a Black woman, she's still read in society as Black, and she is still perceived as Black, right? And so anyone who has that proximity to Blackness experiences anti-Blackness. So I just want to point that out as well for folks saying, but she's not Black. How can she experience anti-Blackness? In our society that is very binary in their thinking, Kamala is Black. We read Kamala as a Black woman with the silk press, and she is treated as such.
Yeah. And if you took her name away and put her in South Philly, they're not going to stop and ask questions.
You started calling her Cam Harris. That's a Black woman. Cam Harris, that's a full Black woman.
Cam Harris.
Cammy Harris, right? Like that is a full Black woman. So I think going into the conversation, what I think we're trying to bring to the this conversation about not necessarily Kamala Harris, but how Black women and Black non-men can protect themselves during this season is that I think it's really hard. And you always say this, like, it's hard for folks to engage in a conversation about Kamala without being anti-Black. I think it's damn near impossible.
It's really hard. And before we get into it, I just also want to say racism, right? Those systemic inequalities, institution practices, cultural norms that create, perpetrate, and maintain racial hierarchies, right? I always try to help people understand the distinctions there. And then xenophobia, because to the extent that she is a child of immigrants, she experiences that fear, that dislike, the prejudice against people who are perceived as foreign or as different. So those are 3 levels. And xenophobia can manifest itself in discriminatory attitudes, exclusionary policies, hate speech, or even violence. So like we're talking about a Black woman who is experiencing now and throughout her lifetime racialized oppression. And to bring us back to this moment, Jay, I think you're very right that everyday smuggler Black girls like you and me, right, need protection, because in this political moment where political violence is rapid, political violence does have real world impacts, right? I don't want to get into a whole bunch of it, right? But it's the deepening of divisions. Political violence deepens already existing ethnic, religious, or ideological divisions. Political violence creates an uptick in violent hate crimes, right? Political violence creates a tear in our social fabric, eroding trust in political institutions and communities, right? Political violence exasperates existing inequalities that already impact under-resourced, under-supported groups of people. You know, what's that statement? And I don't even know who we attribute it to at this point. When America gets a cold, Black people get the flu, right? So for people who might be like, well, why are we even having this conversation? Because the reality is that these political moments have real world impacts.
And I also want to point out the language and the way that we speak about Kamala, even small things like the fact that when I'm at the gym and they have it on the news, it's so interesting that Fox News always describes I was going to call her President Harris, always describes VP Harris as Kamala, but they call Biden by his last name. They call Trump by his last name. Every other presidential candidate gets called by even Obama gets called by their last name. But when it comes to a Black woman,
it's her first name, like,
right? It's like Kamala, right? And so the very subtle disrespect that she experiences, even how people speak about Kamala on social media, right? And look at me calling her Kamala. Even how
that's the thing I was just about to say. I've had to coach myself, like me, and you know how much I stand for Black women. I've really had to be like, okay, put some respect on her name, Vice President Harris.
What annoys me is people say Kamala. It is not Kamala. When she says her name, it is Kamala. Folks still love to insist on calling her Kamala, right? That's not how you say her name. And I think that the way that we speak about people, Black women online, even Black women we don't agree with, has real world implications. If we normalize disrespecting and denigrating a Black woman that we don't agree with, that we think is a genocide apologist, that we think all of is funding, you know, like regardless of how we feel, I'm not a fan of Candace Owens, but I still think that the language and the manner in which we speak about her online has implications for me as a Black woman. So
Yes.
I'm mindful of the way that I speak about her. And also, I don't think that I want to add to the denigration of Black women because, as we know, crapping on Black women is social currency. And folks do it so easily that I don't want to add to what is already being done and said about us online. And so I think this conversation is so important because even the way that we speak about VP Harris is just dripping in misogynoir. And it's just
I was
like,
just about to say, and that's where you, as the amazing thought leader that you are, I think this would be a great opportunity for you to tell people what misogynoir is, because you've
yeah,
written
so
about it, you study about it, you write about it.
absolutely. So Dr. Moya Bailey is the amazing, brilliant individual that coined the term misogynoir, which describes the particular type of gendered racism that Black women specifically experience. And so how does sexism and racism work in tandem to harm the experiences of Black women? And what does that look like? So when we're talking about misogynoir, we're talking about that very unique experience. And what I like about the term misogynoir is I think misogynoir is the term that Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw had created through intersectionality that has become bastardized, right? So initially when Kimberly Crenshaw coined that term, she was talking about, we didn't have the language for misogynoir, but she was talking about the gendered racism that Black women specifically experience. And what has happened over time is that term has become like mutilated and changed, and it means anybody with different marginalized identities, but that wasn't the origin of the term. So
Yeah,
I
I
actually
mean,
love
even
misogynoir because it's specific to our experiences.
you know this about me, but I get so frustrated when I hear people even utilize the term intersectionality, and not because I want to tone police other people, um, but simply put, it's like y'all do know that it is a legal framework that was built on 3 court cases that centered Black women, right? So I almost want to be telling people like, don't even let it come out your mouth if you don't know like that,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that back into people's remembrance.
Yeah. So like I wanted to ask you, like, for the folks watching who are like, why is it, 2 questions, like why is it important? I feel like that's like an obvious question. Why is it important for Black women to find ways to protect themselves during this current season? But what does that protection actually look like?
Well, first of all, one of the things we have to recognize is that historically, Zora Neale Hurston tells us that Black women are the mules of the world, right? And historically, there's always been a huge amount of expectations about our output, with not a lot of energy towards giving back to us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for example, I name myself as a descendant of enslaved people. Black women who nursed, you know, let's just be frank, white children, white babies, and to the extent that they might have not been able to nurse their own children, right? And I know that's a visceral, and maybe even a triggering imagery for me to bring up, but I think it just really highlights how Black women have sustained other groups of people. You know what I'm saying? And so that has become normalized, right? Um, but there's not been a social contract that maintains that our care and protection and well-being be amplified, right? So when you think about something like the 1977 Combahee River Collective Statement, Black women are like these amazing Black women who were radical, and some of them still are, right? Some of them are still alive, who have been in a lot of movement spaces, Black Panther, second wave feminism, global, all these different radical traditions and radical activities. But they come out of that and saying, no particular movement has ever centered our oppression, right? And so what that means is that Black women have to make a decision to center their oppression, right? Black women have to make a decision to say our needs are need to be acknowledged and addressed. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but it starts with us. And part of that is just us saying out loud, I hurt, I feel, I exist. I'm not going to be at work and see colleagues pass around a degrading or dehumanizing image and just sit in silence and just be like, okay, like if I don't say anything. Like that's what we've been coached to do, Jay, is just be like, hopefully it'll pass. You know what I'm saying? So first thing that I think Black women have to do is recognize that history of being denied care, protection, resources, and saying, hey, I'm no longer going to keep up that pattern of just ignoring my needs, ignoring my wants, ignoring the places where I don't feel safe.
And
So,
like understanding that even if you don't support VP Harris, like it takes like a lot of mental energy to not call her Kamala.
well, we're doing it from now. There's this other component, which is like, hey, girl, hey.
Yeah, like a sister girl type of like,
Mm-hmm.
but excuse me, I want to put respect on her name, and I like to give people their flowers, right? And call somebody, even if I disagree with you, if you a doctor, if you a whatever, I'm gonna call you by. I'm
Well,
not
I was
gonna.
just about to say, like, because the Black women, and you've written about this, like Black women who earn PhDs and all that stuff, and how people never want to do that. So, like, for example, on a day-to-day basis, I don't call you doctor, right? But in certain spaces, I do, because I recognize the context requires people to put some respect on your name. But in our everyday group chats and text messages, I don't be like, Dr. Janice.
Not like, hey, Dr. J. But it's like you got to put respect on, you got to put respect on the name. And I forgot the point that I was gonna make. It
Oh
was
my
gonna
gosh, I'm sorry, because
no, it's okay. It was gonna be a point about
I was
Kamala.
just talking about how
Oh,
Black women
so
have to name their
that's what it is.
pain.
So
Yeah.
essentially I was saying when we asked this question about why it's important to protect Black women during this election season, what people say about Kamala, what people say, even if you don't agree with her, right? If you are a Trump supporter, if you are a Green Party voter, go Jill side, if you're an uncommitted, but if you don't want to vote, if you are, anyone, what we say and the manner in which we talk about Kamala impacts Black women globally. Because if we give people the green light to, use images of Kamala's body, for example, without her consent, and use it to like defame her, even if we don't agree with her, we don't like her, right? That impacts us, and that contributes to the culture of just like it contributes to the patriarchy in so many ways. And I hate using the term the patriarchy, because I feel like the way that the term has been sort of like vilified, I don't
And co-opted.
and co-opted. I try not to use that term, but I think that like there are larger implications, and so we have to be really mindful and delicate and nuanced in the way that we speak about VP Harris, and we can talk about her and disagree with her policies and disagree with all of the things she's done without also engaging in anti-Blackness or misogynoir or denigrating her for all of these, all of her identities. And I think that we have to understand that there has to be that common level of understanding when we speak about her online, when we engage in these conversations, but I don't think we have that. And so not protecting, or not being mindful and delicate in the way that we speak about her impacts us. If people think that they can pass around a picture of Kamala Harris in a bikini and it's funny, or say she slept her way to the top, which a lot of people who are against her are saying, how does that then normalize the sexualization of Black women and Black girls? Right? Like we have to
And
think
there's
about.
already a pre-existing term for people to do that anyway.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I'm just adding that.
Exactly. So it's like it's not about a like, oh, y'all are supporting this or y'all, it's like we see, I think it's important to see things beyond and I think what's sad, what has made me sad in this season is I don't think a lot of Black people and Black women see things that way. I think a lot of Black folks who are anti-Kamala or anti-VP Harris have used all kinds of denigrating, as you and I have talked about, as we've seen, use a lot of like denigrating language to describe her because it's like she's a genocide supporter, she's a cop, she's a this, she's a that. And that the way that, you know, calling her a whore, saying this or saying that, and it's like all of that normalizes the mistreatment of Black women and Black girls. And so we can speak about her, we can disagree with her wholeheartedly and say, you've done horrible things. These are the horrible things you've done, without engaging in anti-Blackness and misogynoir.
I want to give a very specific example here, because I've seen, unfortunately, people make comparisons to, let's say, Vice President Harris being a Nazi, right? And when I see things like that, it makes me think, somebody doesn't have a library book, because if you did, and this is me being condescending. I actually have,
if I had known you were going to use this example, I have that book, a book that talks about what you're about to say.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like, because here's the thing. And it feels so terrible, like we live in a world we have to very much say out loud, I don't believe in genocide. I don't condone genocidal projects, but this is where we are, right? But you don't get to the genocidal project that was initiated by Hitler and Nazi Germany, right? Without acknowledging the role that American eugenics scientists had in that project, right? In short order, Hitler's able to call the United States and be like, hey, how do I exterminate Jewish people? And they're like, bet, let's talk to you about how we've exterminated Black people, right? And with that history in mind, I don't know how you name a Black American a Nazi. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of these conversations are also devoid of historical context, right? And so even when we talk about what are the real world impacts for people like you and I, we have to recognize like none of these things happen in a vacuum, right? And here's the thing, you and I don't have Secret Service, Janice. Last time I checked, last time you and I hung out, you ain't have no black ties suited up people like the Eagles on the
right.
the Eagles on the flight or Eagles on the run. That wasn't, we were just like living our best lives hoping that, you know, we made it through traffic. Everyday smuggler Black women don't have the protection that Vice President Harris has. So if the permission structures exist that allow people to treat Black women however they want to, speak to Black women however they want to, do whatever they want to do with our words and our images, then that does have a trickle down effect in the society.
Absolutely. And so going back to this overarching point of like protection and why it's important and what does that look like during this particular moment, like where we are leading up to the election, and then also regardless of who wins, like, right? Because I think this is a conversation that extends way past the election, because we're still going to need protection. If VP Harris does win, we're going to need more protection, right? There's going to be all of this white lash that Carol Anderson talked about. If VP Harris doesn't win, we're still going to need the protection from, you know, based on this new administration that wants to literally strip us of every right that we have. And so what does protection look like in this current moment and in this current era? How can Black women protect themselves, protect ourselves in this moment?
And I would add, what can leaders do, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm gonna say something comical because that's my personality, but it's also serious, which is like bring back that ERG y'all got rid of. Like, like if we just gonna keep call a spade, right? Like that ERG y'all created in 2020, you know, to be like, oh my gosh, we're post-racial, that hasn't been funded, or you know, whatever, you've decided like we don't need to have this. Like that is a very concrete way to like, hopefully the ERG still exists. So let's just hope
Yeah.
it
But
never
also like
ended.
creating some specific supports for, because I've never seen a company that has an ERG specifically for Black women.
That's what I'm saying. So if it doesn't exist, create it. If there's something like, for example, if there's a person of color ERG, go to some of those leaders and say, hey, what would it look like and what would it take to craft a space for Black women who labor in this organization to have additional support? So like that's one of the first things I think can happen. And to your point, now it makes me want to do like some kind of survey, right? Like it I don't think I've ever heard of one either.
I've
So
never seen a company that has, but you know, like I think to that point of like creating the supports that are needed for Black women in the workplace, I think what I've seen as somebody who, and I feel like you can attest to this, whenever I do like workshops or trainings with organizations, 99.9% of the time, it's a Black woman that has brought me in to
mhm,
do it. Right. And so I think that like really like listening to your Black women leaders and Black women employees who are saying, we really need education around hair discrimination. We
mhm,
really need support around misogynoir. We really need education around this specific topic, microaggressions that Black women specifically experience, like, and really taking heed to that. Right now, I'm in talks with somebody who is a Black woman and she's part of a board and she's experiencing a lot of just like exclusionary, harmful behavior perpetuated by her white woman colleague. And she's being gaslit and she's being sort of ignored. Her needs are being put to the back burner because she's the only Black person in this like sort of board in this position. And I see that as like harmful to the Black woman, but also harmful to anybody aspiring to that position. Because if I see that this is not a safe place for me as a Black woman, or if I see that I'm not really represented, that's going to prevent me from wanting to ascend to those particular levels in the organization. And so, like, are you listening to the needs specifically of this population? Again, I've never really seen where folks like get the feedback and then specifically look at like what are white women what are Black women desiring and what are they asking about. And what I have seen is like problems where Black women are leaving the organization, right?
yeah.
Where you find that like you have a revolving door of Black women who don't want to stay. And I think a large part of that is because you're not prioritizing their needs. You're not making them feel safe and protected. And I think in this particular season, where there's so much vitriol coming at Black women from all sides, creating some sort of safe haven is so important in the workplace. And I think that there's ways to even do that outside of the workplace, like creating community for Black women to have that sort of like feel that sort of safeness. What does that look like for you outside of the workplace? Like,
Wait, I
how do
had
you
one more
create?
but I did have one more workplace thing though.
Yeah.
So we need to broaden our definition of violence. And we've talked about this before. I think a lot of times people think, oh, discrimination at work looks like one thing. It
Mhm.
looks like your colleague hosting an inappropriate like meme or something. You get what I'm saying? So I think we have to be expansive in understanding that. Like one of the things that we talk about is like, although violence can look like hate speech, discrimination, intimate partner violence is not limited to only physical and interpersonal experiences. You know, we have to recognize that violence can be multifaceted. You know, violence can be created by governmental institutions, but they can be reinforced through organizational spaces. So, trans misogynoir, right, is a building on the term that Dr. Moya Bailey created. And so it specifically talks about the oppression of Black trans feminine people, where their unique positionality allows them to be exposed to anti-Blackness, um, heteronormativity, misogyny, right, all those things. So we have to kind of recognize that there's all types of violent experiences people have in the workplace. And because of that, that's why you have to have a practice, what I call intellectual humility, recognizing there will always be gaps. So even if your organization feels like you've been very positive, very progressive in terms of creating ERGs, creating fellowships, that kind of stuff, recognize that it's like your new mom, right? You
Mhm.
can't feel like the things you do for your child today is like, I've done all the things for my baby.
Mhm.
Don't ask for more, right? You know,
Exactly.
as
Yeah, there
your
will
child.
always be like something
Yes.
else. But I think people approach it as like we do the things and we've done like we check the boxes and then that's it. But it's like a maintenance. It's an ongoing
Yeah.
thing where you don't just there's no end.
Yeah, you can't go up to your baby and be like at 11, like, well, I gave you all the things when you were 5. You
Exactly.
need more things?
Like what more do you want from me? Right? Like so I think that that's a really good and I think what protecting Black women in the workplace requires us to protect Black women outside of the workplace.
Yes. And so to your point, I'll say resource allocation. What tools do Black women need to thrive? What support can we give them um, to create the possibility? That might also mean like rethinking through organizational policies around like vacation. You get what I'm saying? Like creating some kind of like encouraging Black women to take day off, like, you know, so they can like have days to rest, to like rejuvenate themselves. You get what I'm saying? So they can be a part of community events, you know, like having a time fluidity practice where Black women can call in more during this time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
not every organizational space have mental health days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may not necessarily name those things as such, but like, have you created spaces where Black women can take the day off? I'm still, that's still organizational led, but I'm just saying like there are things that organizations could do to like influence Black women to take care of themselves. Because I don't want to be like, y'all should just pay for all the Black women to go to a spa, although like dead ass,
Although I would not
right?
turn down a
I
spa.
would not turn it down.
But like also I think creating that infrastructure is so important because like you brought in Zora Neale Hurston earlier in the conversation, but Black women are at work seen as the mules and we're called on to be the saviors of every situation. When things go wrong, when the DEI stuff fails, when any sort of like we're the cleanup crew, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
put in positions and leadership positions of power when companies are in this turmoil where it's like, oh, we'll just bring in this person or that person or this person to
well,
help.
I mean,
And then
you
when it
see,
doesn't work, we're the scapegoats. And it's like, well, we brought Kina in to do the DEI stuff. She didn't help. So it's all on her. So it's like creating these infrastructures where we can rest, where we can rejuvenate, where we are supported will help us in and I'm not advocating for making Black women the saviors, but since in so many organizations we are the saviors, we need to have those infrastructures in place for us to actually like rest and heal.
yeah, I was just thinking about the irony of what you're saying because I feel like that's exactly what the Democratic Party has done to Vice President Harris.
Mhm.
It's like Joe Biden can't win this election.
Mammification, right?
Right? Like, you know, Drew Barrymore got on TV is like, the nation needs you to be her mama. Ah, and my Meg the Stallion.
And she just looked like
Awkward,
I'm
awkward.
gonna just
But
smile and nod
who else
because
would you, but who else would somebody do that to? Who else in the history of the United States, we've never seen it, who else would be like, you know what, girl, I will give you 90 days to figure out how to win the presidency. You get what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
that whole thing is it exemplifies what you just said. Calling a Black woman in the ninth hour or the 11th hour, I forget what you call it, and being like, hey, we can't do it.
Mhm.
Right? And then it's like, and who was the first group that gathered together to
We are
organize
the trendsetters, Black women.
fundraise? Black women got on that call like within a week, I think, and was like, "What we
Yeah,
gotta
because
do, y'all?"
she was the presumptive nominee on a Sunday. I
Yep.
think Biden said he supported her on a Monday, and then that next Sunday they were
Black
on the call.
on the call. So we are always we're always positioning ourselves to be like, let's get it done.
Mhm.
And whether we like that or not, that's kind of like the shape we occupy. And if that's the case, then there needs to be an awareness and acknowledgement and affirmation of the people who do that kind of work.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I always, bring it back to, I'm always thinking of like, as people who do stuff with workplaces, I'm always thinking about how what happens outside of the workplace impacts what happens in the workplace. And it's interesting because politics is one of those things that back in the day, you weren't politics, religion, race, like those were the things that were the pink elephants in the room. Like you weren't supposed to talk about those sorts of things, but you have to understand how what's happening in the larger context, like how seeing the Sonia Massey video or even hearing about the story, how like literally all of that happened, I think in the span of like 2 weeks, where the body cam footage went, we saw the body cam footage of Sonia Massey, and then Kamala was a presumptive Democratic nominee. And it was like all of these things are happening in a year where we had the unaliving of Dr. Bailey at the end of 2023. We saw what happened with Dr. Gay at Harvard. We are seeing what's happening like in so many different ways to Black women, public figures, and folks who aren't even public figures, right? We see to bring it back, what has been happening. I think this will go up in September, but what was happening in August was, especially on TikTok, we saw this like back and forth going on between um, Black folks and Palestinians. And there was like this sort of like infiltrating of, and Dr. Sam Ray just taught me the new term of PSYOP, which I was not familiar with, where it's like the pitting of our groups against each other, right? And I think that like all of this is having an impact on Black women in different ways, whether you're chronically online or not, right? All of that is having an impact. And I actually think it impacts us more when we are someone who's chronically online. But even if you're not on any social media, you read articles, you see like the way that they are speaking about VP Harris in these articles, or the way that your coworker is describing VP Harris. All of that impacts you as a Black woman, impacts Black women that you work with. And so this time is particularly like, I want to say just like a very delicate time because of like just the state of things feels so divisive, but it feels like different, right? Like I don't even know how to fully describe it. But I think like also thinking about how what's happening in the larger context within society is impacting the Black women that you engage with or that you interact with. And, I think that also like asking this question, you and I had a conversation offline, and you brought up a really good point about like the importance of asking the question of like, how can I support you? Or what does support look like for you? Where, asking the Black women in your life this question can be really powerful because there's people, a lot of us Black women have this savior complex where we don't even ask for help, or we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to reach out and say, I need you. I need your support. And so being really proactive with asking all of the Black women in your life that question can be so powerful.
I feel like that's a good place to like wrap this up, Jay. Like that is. I know we have a practice in sisterhood of reaching out to each other and be like, hey girl, hey, like what do you need support? So this is also a place where if you are a Black woman and if you don't have that, hopefully you do, but this would be a good time to like break through some of that and be like, hey, hey girl, hey, like um how are you feeling? Checking in. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that as a practice. I think we typically have thought about that as a courtesy,
Mm-hmm.
right? But using that kind of check-in model as a practice is a
Yeah.
game changer. How can organizations employ you that are like ready to take on this work? Jay, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think really thinking about like before reaching out to me, are you asking the Black women in your workplace? What is it that you need? What's the support look like for you? And letting that be the driver. Because I think when you do that, the really magical and beautiful things can happen when you really like prioritize the needs of Black women. But like we said, I don't often go into workplaces and see the needs of Black women being prioritized. And as somebody that really like what drives me is that Combahee River Collective quote where if Black women were free, everybody else would be free. So in your workplace, if Black women receive the support and and just the support systems were there for Black women, everybody else would be elevated and liberated through that. And so I think for folks who may be thinking like, why am I only going to prioritize Black women, or why does it matter to prioritize Black women? We have to get at the problem at the root, like you always talk about. And that requires us to look at who is the most marginalized, who experiences the most severe forms of oppression, and how do we create supports for them. So I think really letting your Black women employees drive your needs is so important. Like, what do they need? Do they want education? Do they want to bring someone like me or someone like you in for education? Do they want that community through an ERG? Do they need specifically like sponsorship or mentorship? What is it that they want? And how can you provide that is a really powerful and important question. And even just looking at like going back to like the date, what is the data telling you, right? How many Black women are in leadership positions? How many Black women are being promoted? Are Black women being promoted and advanced at the same rates? And just pay, right? Pay is just such an obvious sort of thing where it's like most of us Black women have stories of us being underpaid in whatever organizations we've been affiliated with or associated with. So are we being paid equitably? And so I think letting Black women that work at your company be the driver and tell you what their needs are is so important. And I think not prioritizing this means you are not going to be sustainable as an organization. Because someone may be watching this and saying like, who cares about Black women? I'm for everybody, all women, all employees matter. Who cares about? And it's like, okay, yeah, you don't have to prioritize Black women, but if you want to be an organization that is sustainable and that lasts and stands the test of time, you have to prioritize those who are most vulnerable and most disadvantaged in your organization.
Agreed. I just
Do
want
you
to
have
chime in.
any, like final thoughts? Because thank you for the opening. You're also available to be hired by organizations and institutions for all their needs related to equity, decolonization. You do a ton of work. Your platform, Divesting from Whiteness and the Anti-Blackness Reader, are really helpful educational resources for anyone that wants to learn more. You have a podcast, Please Stay Black. So you have a lot of resources. And I actually shout you out when I do workshops. I have you as like, want to learn more? I provide those resources. But do you have any final words or any final thoughts for folks watching this?
Well, I was just about to say, to toot my own horn, there are two resources that I think could be useful right now. I think I'm one of the only, and it says a lot for me to say this, but I think I'm one of the only DEI consulting firm that literally offers a workshop on auditing and addressing anti-Blackness. I have not seen that show up in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So, that is a learning and development opportunity. And I just created a guide for people to use that says how to discuss Kamala Harris without being anti-Black. So I'm actually going to send that out in form of newsletter today. So
they should, in order to get access to that, they should subscribe to J Reed Consulting. Is it J Reed Consulting LLC.com or jreedconsulting.com?
Now listen, on the show notes, we'll put the link for how to subscribe to
the link will subscribe to Kina's newsletter, subscribe to my newsletter, download those resources, reach out to her for auditing your anti-Blackness, because you're the only person that I know that I can think of that actually does provide that. So that is definitely something that you want to reach out to Kina about. Also, if you're interested in understanding the system of whiteness and how to
I was just
decenter,
about to say, like, you can't, they, unfortunately, they go hand in hand. Like, you can't really eliminate anti-Blackness without actually decentering whiteness. So I was just about to circle, great
so if
minds.
you
Like,
want a workshop on decentering whiteness in the workplace, what that looks like, holla at your girl, Janice. If you want to learn more about anti-Blackness in your workplace, auditing your anti-Blackness, holla at your girl, Kina.
yeah.
So thank y'all so much for watching the first of many shows. Maybe we could do this like every month since we're like, it's not a live stream. I feel like,
Don't be making people the promise.
I know, right? Don't overpromise or oversell. But
This is
thank
me
y'all so much.
reminding my friend that they are a new mom.
I know, new mom trying to navigate life.
Look, we the intergenerational healing. I'm reminding you can't do all the things.
Right.
But what I will say is, it feels like we're gonna have to have a circle back episode.
We got to, because it's September
because
now. We got to do something before the election and then probably right after the election. So y'all will see a lot more of us because it's a critical time right now.
Look, the streets are talking, sis. The streets are talking.
Yes.
As always, I'm honored to be a part of the K of J.K No for real.
And I'm honored to share space with you, be in community with you. I'm always learning from you. And so I hope y'all enjoyed this conversation. Enjoy YouTube fam, enjoy LinkedIn. We will be in the comments,
subscribe. We're supposed to say stuff like, subscribe, hit that subscribe button.
Subscribe, all of that. Y'all will be watching this on my YouTube, which is being resurrected because I used to be more active on it. But LinkedIn fam, you already know what time it is. You've seen us. You already know what it is. So also our links, if you want to connect with us across platforms, are in the description as well. So, and the show notes. So see y'all soon.